Previously on the S.C.A.L Method podcast. So when you have low testosterone, how does that present typically? As it declines in men, many physiological and psychological processes become impaired. So you have issues. So think, I listed off everything that it is responsible for, regulating and improving on, right? So just think the opposite here. So testosterone is key in building lean muscle tissue and strength. So a decreased amount of testosterone, or if you have low T, it's really hard for you to build lean muscle tissue. It's really hard for you to maintain lean muscle tissue. And it's even harder for you to gain or maintain strength. And I've went over the importance of lean muscle tissue. Lean muscle tissue is super vital for, again, this is how you lead to all these health issues with lower lean muscle tissue. It leads to metabolic issues, it leads to heart issues. So again, lean muscle tissue equals life in this case. Low T means low lean muscle tissue, which means low life. Low testosterone makes it more difficult for you to achieve emotional fitness. There are a lot of various negative emotions associated with low T, right? And this is where I stated at the beginning, where it's just like, well, is the angry, loud, bombastic man, does he have too much testosterone? No, in fact, he might actually be the exact opposite, because some of the psychological effects of having low testosterone deal with mood swings. A masculine man rules over his assignment and rules over the environment, but he also, last but not least, rules over his home. Okay, and this is where we get into some sticky situations, so to speak, because modern day everything will tell you that that's a misogynistic idea. And I could see what people are kind of getting at there, but they're wrong, to say the least. Like that's actually again, notice what's going out there in the culture compared to what the truth is. What's out in the culture is the exact opposite of the truth. And then it's so deceiving, and it's so tricky that it has populations of people believing a lie as if it's true. And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in a garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord amongst the trees of the garden. So what does that say, right? What that implies is that God and Adam had often, and it looked like Eve as well, had often walked with God in the garden. It was like, hey, let's take our afternoon walk. So they were chilling, they were communing together, right? So what that breaks down to is we're created to walk with God in companionship and communication and in shared rule. What's going on, everybody? Listen, I just wanted to break in really quick, a slight change in the format here for this podcast. I wanted to kind of talk about the responses that I got from episode 9 for my sons, aka the Man Show. The amount of responses that I got for this particular episode was really good. It was kind of alarming to me a little bit. So that kind of told me I was saying things in terms of masculinity, and saying things about testosterone, and saying things about men's health that I'm guessing doesn't really get said, at least in this way. So I really appreciated a lot of the responses that I got from that episode. And I mean, there were a couple people who were even saying that, like, that's what a good father looks like. And I listen, I'm not pumping myself up or anything like that at all, but I really do appreciate some of the emails that people sent me directly. Now, there have also been some emails that people sent me that, you have to expect whenever you put something like this out there. especially for the culture to kind of gnaw on and chew on a little bit, that there's going to be some negative responses, or somebody calling you a sexist or misogynist, or I mean, I even, there was one person who was even like, hey, look, all you want is your submissive wife to listen to whatever you say and do and blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, you know what? So when there were negative responses to what I was talking about and what I was trying to put out there and the ideas that I'm trying to, kind of help grow and, just kind of add my voice to this whole thing, whenever the negative viewpoints come up, or the opposite viewpoints, because I listen to them still, but I find that it's the same stuff every time, right? Like, at some point in time, you're going to have to come up with something different other than calling a man a misogynist. At some point in time, you're going to have to come up with something different other than calling a man a sexist, because it's not sexism if they're following logic. It's not misogyny if they're adhering to an order that was created. But I'm about to get fired up, and we're at the beginning of this episode. So let me calm it down a little bit. But there's just a couple other notes when it comes to the testosterone. I talked about testosterone and how we're kind of in a mini testosterone crisis. And let me tell you right now, for this episode, the word crisis is going to come up quite a bit, and we'll see later on, right? But there's this floating idea. As soon as I posted all this stuff, there's this floating idea that, testosterone is a bad thing. Testosterone makes men aggressive and makes them this, that, and a third. And I'm just like, okay, this is all a myth still. And the people who are propagating these myths are kind of just like, I don't want to put anybody out there. So you can imagine who is really propagating these ideas, right? And it just baffles me that somebody would say, like, hey, you know what? I would never want to be in a room full of men because they're all like, criminals and different things, and they're all affected by testosterone. And it's just like, that doesn't even make logical sense. That means that would be saying that every single healthy man that has adequate levels of testosterone is overly aggressive. That's not true. So it's just like this. So that's just one thing when it comes to the testosterone talk. And I hope you are out there. If you're a man out there and something I said resonated with you, go get your levels checked, right? At the end of the day, go get your levels checked. That's all I'm trying. More awareness to testosterone levels, more awareness to low testosterone levels, because it does affect your decision making. It does affect what you end up doing in life, right? So again, I wanted to quickly touch on that. I don't want to go off in a rant territory, but I have a feeling this episode is going to go off in a rant territory, because the next part that I wanted to talk about was the actual segment that I dedicated to my sons. For my sons, this is, what is masculinity? What is a masculine man? And that, again, I've received a bunch of wonderful responses to that. And I appreciate you all for just sitting there, at least hearing me out and thinking about these ideas, right? Because we have an issue with masculinity nowadays, and even more so. And I'm starting to see more and more people are talking about, well, what is a man and what is really masculinity? And it's just like, it's unfortunately now being used as the weapon, because we're in an election cycle. So it was just like, even outside of all that, there was an issue with masculinity. There were two very extreme sides of what masculinity is and what it's supposed to be. And, so again, I appreciate all the responses, and I even appreciate the ones that were negative, that were opposite of what I was trying to say, because that just kind of tells me a little bit more about what I'm dealing with here, long term, right? So this is episode 10. Episode 10 is a sound mind, and we're finally going over part 2 of the S.C.A.L method now, right? So remember, part 1 is a sound heart. Part 2 is a sound mind. And so we're going to talk about that. Our quick tip, we're going to talk about the value of playing. And you hear me right, like of actually going out to play as an adult, right? Not just as a kid. We already know as a child that playing helps develop their brain. Well, come to find out, playing helps develop adults' brains as well and keeps you sharp. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Again, we're talking about a sound mind for our main topic. And we are now reducing or kind of cutting down to one random topic because these episodes run really, really long. and I'm trying to drop off the information and get up out of your hair. So the one random topic is actually where I'm going to talk about the crises a little bit, right? And we have a critical thinking crisis. And we're going to, kind of dig into that a little bit, and it kind of dovetails into what a sound mind is as well. So it's all going to be one cohesive episode. Anyway, what's going on, everybody? How you doing out there? I'm Coach Evan. This is Say Cheese and Live Studio, and you're listening to the S.C.A.L Method Podcast, your one-stop shop for not only physical fitness, but mental fitness, emotional fitness, and spiritual fitness. Let's get to the episode. Let's do it. All right. So for the quick tip here, go out and play. Yes, go out and play as an adult, like the kids do. So listen, there is value in going out to play or carving out time to play as an adult, right? So what do I mean by play though, right? So by play, I mean doing something recreationally that gives you joy or brings excitement to your life, right? Brings or makes you excited. That ultimately though is, and here's the catch, that's good for you and it's not self-defeating, right? So, because there are a whole bunch of things that you could do recreationally that probably gets you excited or that you would consider fun that's not quite as good for you. So I ain't talking about any of those things. I'm talking about something that you could get involved in. Again, it brings excitement, brings joy, that isn't self-defeating, which means it actually kind of pumps you up and makes you better, right? But the key component for this fun thing is that you're not even worried about the end result of it. You're just having fun, and that joy and excitement is in the process of it, right? So, for instance, I have fun playing video games, right? Of course, do I like winning at video games? Yes, absolutely. I do. But I enjoy the process of playing video games and, RPGs, action RPGs, some sports games, not as many, boxing, fighting games, whatever it is. But I enjoy doing that, right? And that's fun. That's play for me. Now, there's always a point where what you decide to do to play can be self-defeating if you do too much of it. Right? And so everything has to be in balance. But the general idea of playing, or finding something to play, or finding time to play is basically finding time, carving out time to do something that brings you joy, that excites you, that doesn't basically take away from you without ever really worrying about the end result of said thing. Okay? So the great thing about just playing for adults, there's a bunch of research on it. There's a lot of it. So there's this one institute, the National Institute for Play, NIFP. I think that's what it is. Google it. I might have to Google it again. But NIFP, the National Institute for Play, has a bevy of research on playing for adults and its benefits, right? So there's two main benefits that I want to talk about, right? First one is it lowers your stress, which stress is a sneaky killer of people. And we already know this, right? But then the second one is it promotes overall well-being, and it does it in a number of different ways. So let's just start with the stress relief or the stress reduction, okay? Playing can cause your body to release endorphins. That's the feel good hormone. So, playing a lot of times will reduce your stress by helping you feel at peace and relaxed and just real chill, feeling good. You're feeling good, all right? And that's a big benefit. A big benefit physiologically, right? The next one is it typically helps adults cope with the stressors in life and the negative things that pop up in life. So playing, actually, there's research that shows that playing helps adults cope, but it also helps adults endure. And, go back a few episodes as exactly what I'm talking about in terms of how to become a stronger person. So if you make the links here, playing helps you become better, right? Again, everything in balance, but playing lowers your stress, forces your body to release endorphins, and can help you. There's a link between adults that play and their coping capabilities, right? So more the adults who play are more likely to be able to cope with the stresses, and they also typically are able to use a lot of the mechanisms for lowering stress, like reframing different things that happen to you in your life. And I talk about that at least 4 different episodes already. So it's really good for doing that, and playing helps. So it helps promote that feeling of overall well-being, right? And it does so many different things in so many different areas that so people who typically play are, one, usually more creative. Two, they typically have a greater sense of hope, which I found very interesting. And three, they are usually better mentally. Their mental health is actually, mentally, they're in tip-top shape, which also leads to better physical fitness as well. So that third one is adults who play typically are mentally fit and still physically fit. So it all kind of goes hand in hand. So the NIFP, National Institute for Play, they have this list of play personalities, and I think that's so cool. Okay, so I like the psychological test and stuff like that to see, or personality test. I like all those things just to see, hey, I'm this, and this, and what are you, right? It's some nerdy stuff, I know, but I just like that stuff. So they have their list of like play personality types, and actually I had to kind of write it all down and everything like that. So I'm gonna read them off to you, and then just so that you can have that information, and so you can figure out also based on that information. Of course, you can go on the website. What are the best modes for you to use so that you can play and play effectively, so that you can get all the benefits out of what you're doing here, right? So here are the list of like play personalities, right? So the first one is the collector. They build collections. They so I mean, it's really kind of simple, self-explanatory there, but they'll collect coins, stamps, playing cards, cars, if you have a lot of money, apparently. But they like collecting things. So they build up their little collection just so they can look at it. Not even just sell it or anything like that, but just that act of pulling in, collecting something, and organizing it in a particular way. That's the collector, right? So people who have fun doing that, that's what they do, right? That's what brings them joy and excitement. So I actually know a few people who collect cars, and what they'll do is they'll collect like beat up cars and then like fix them up and then just keep them in the garage, right? Not even selling them or anything like that. It's just but that's a multiple play personality thing too, right? So and I'll show you why. But the next play personality is a competitor. They like playing games and winning. But the thing is they like playing games and winning, but there has to be a set of rules that are lined up with it. So like I mean, in essence, that's the point of a game. You know, you're doing something, you have a set of rules, and you can see who can do this and who can do this better, right? Competitors, that's how they have fun. So you could think athletes, people playing sports, people playing video games, people playing board games, things like that, right? The next one is the creator or the artist. So the creator or the artist, basically, they make things and they make things work, right? So this could be a machinist on one end or a painter on the other. They're both basically getting joy and excitement out of what they're doing and what they're pulling together, what they're creating, or what they're fixing, right? Same thing with like a carpenter. So a painter, carpenter, machinist, they're all in the same kind of play personality group there, right? Then you have the director. The director, it is basically, they're the what I would call like the party host. They plan and they direct and they get everything lined up and organized in a particular way so that it goes off and everybody has fun at the party, and that gives them great joy, and that's them playing. So I know gazillion people, and I'm pretty sure you do too, who are just like that, where they just have fun planning these things, right? Then you have the explorer. This one is a very interesting one to me, right? So the explorers play by discovering new things. But it's interesting, right? So like you would think, well, explorers, so they're discovering a new physical location. That's part of it. But they can also discover a new feeling or new emotion, or they can also discover a new way of thinking. So these are the researchers. These people have fun. The explorers have fun by digging in, researching, gathering information, which is a little bit of the collector too. But anyway, gathering information and it's very interesting. So like you could be an explorer in all four arenas of the S.C.A.L method. We'll talk about that a little bit too. Then the next play personality is the Joker. That's self-explanatory. We all know a few Jokers. They like the silliness. They like the pranks. They like the jokes. That gives them great joy. And we know a few people like that too. All right. So, and then there's the kinesthete. They basically get joy out of moving. What they do for fun is move their body. So there's people, dancers, people who like to say work out for random reasons, just because it brings them great joy and it's fun to them. I don't know where you would find that type of person from. And then the next one is is a storyteller. They're the ones that tell the stories. They write the books. They write the plays. Their ground, their main playing ground is their imagination. So they have fun imagining things and pulling together the stories, right? So I laugh at all this, and this is pretty funny to me, but it's also really, really fun. So like, what am I? I am the competitor, the creator, and the explorer, the kinesthete, and storyteller. In varying degrees. I would say my number one probably is the creator or the artist, which is funny. But and then I guess next up will be competitor. Probably not competitor. Probably kinesthete next one, and then competitor, then storyteller. Maybe not in that order per se, but I would say number one is the creator for me. Right. So listen. I want to know what your setup is, right? What's your setup? 'Cause I don't know. This stuff really makes me, I don't know. I'm just really interested in that. So let me know what your setup is. Like I said, I'm the competitor, creator, kinesthete, storyteller, explorer. Probably, you know what? Explorer probably was up there too. But anyway, let me keep moving on. So there's more stuff that we want to talk about when it comes to play. So the question to ask here is, well, how do you play, right? So the first thing is first, right? You have to understand what your play personality is. What are those things that give you great joy, that excite you, that fall within one of those categories of those play personalities, right? Once you figure that out, then you want to kind of line up the events and line up the different things in order for you to, do whatever it is that can be done within those play personalities. In other words, if you know that you're an explorer, set up time to do some research. Or set up time to go to new places, or set up time to actually sit down and think and feel, right? So meditation can kind of help with that. Somebody said something like that before. I don't remember who. Anyway, you would want to set those times up. So and that's kind of like another thought. We set up and we schedule time for everything else as adults, right? Especially if you have kids, you have to schedule everything. Like you just have to, right? Rarely do we ever schedule time to play. So what I propose is you schedule some time to play. Start off with a little bit of time, once a week or something like that. It doesn't have to be anything major, but schedule time out for you to go out and have fun, or to stay home and have fun, for you to do something and have fun, right? So, and again, I want to clarify a little bit more, right? So I guess the founder of the NIFP, his name is Stuart Brown. And he basically gives you a starting point in one of his books that he's written, and I don't remember the title exactly, but I barely remember the quote. I'm reading the quote, but a quote that I pulled from one of his books was that play is the state of mind that one has when absorbed in an activity that provides enjoyment and a suspension of time. So that last part, I didn't really touch on too much, but that last part is crucial, because it's just like, when you're having fun, when it's just like, oh man, like you're not even worried about the clock. Right? It's just like, wait. And all of a sudden you get that feeling that like time flies. But it was really like an hour, but you were having so much fun. It was like 3 hours, but you were having so much fun. It felt like 5 minutes, right? Like time just kind of just like, whoa. And you are completely absorbed in what you're doing. That's when you know you're having fun. So find things that block out time in your schedule, and find those things that you get great joy and excitement out of, that you get that feeling of time is just stopping because I'm doing this right now. All right, so here we go. Part 2 of the S.C.A.L method, a sound mind, right? Now, we want to kind of go over three main things here when it comes to a sound mind, right? What is a sound mind? Why do we want it? And how do we train it? Or how do we train to get it? Okay? So we're going to start off with a verse, of course, in the Bible, because we're going back there, right? 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. There we go. So, for God hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Now, what is a sound mind, right? We're going to start there, and let's offer a little bit of context for this particular verse, right? So this letter, the second letter to Timothy, was actually written to Timothy by Paul when he was in prison, right? And I think this is one of the last few letters he wrote to anyone before he was executed. And I think he was beheaded, I believe, right? That's just on as an aside. But anyway, this was one of the last things he wrote to Timothy. Timothy was basically, he was charged with spreading the gospel upon Paul's departure, right? So, Paul was kind of training him up. Like, hey, look, man, this is what you got to do. So what Paul is saying here, again, just offering a little bit more context to the verse itself. What Paul is saying here is basically he's telling Timothy to stand on business because the Spirit of the Lord is in you, right? And that's that could be taken and used in multiple different areas and places of your life, right? stand on business because the Spirit of the Lord is in you. And it's very interesting because Timothy at this point in time, he was shy. Timothy was timid, right? He was unsure of himself. So in that particular verse, in that letter, Paul was basically telling Timothy, don't be scared. Stand on business because the Spirit of the Lord is in you, right? It's like, so don't be fearful in emotion, but you understand that the Spirit of the Lord gives you power, uh, 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 gives you power of love and of a sound mind. So a clear thinking, rational mind. So let's also kind of dig a little bit more into the idea or the word sound mind. That's translated from a Greek word sophronismos. I believe I'm saying that. I could be jacking that all up actually, but it basically means disciplined, self-controlled, and it's actually a combination of two words, which mean to save and to control. And as a quick aside here, when we're talking about a sound heart, that the word sound means free from damage, not easily wavered, at peace, right? When we're talking about sound mind, sound means similar things, but also means disciplined and self-controlled. So I found that like one of the greatest compliments that you can give someone is to call them a sound individual. And it doesn't sound like much. It doesn't sound like much at all, but it doesn't sound like much, but it's packed with so much meaning. I'll never forget, years ago, I used to work at UPS. I was started off as an unloader, whatever, and then I moved to a sorter, and I was just on the other side. I would grab packages, put them down in little belts and all that fun stuff. It was a cool crew I used to work with back then. That's before I had facial hair, actually. And listen, I didn't have facial hair until I was in like my mid-20s, so whatever. But I was a sorter, and I will never forget this one dude. He was older. He was around like 52, 53, something. He was in his 50s, and just working, sorting, doing the same things that I'm doing. I mean, I looked way more gassed than he did, and it was just interesting. But we would always have these talks, and always ended up leaning more towards the ideas and talks of philosophy, and then we will often talk about who we ultimately wanted to be and what we were working for. And I'll never forget, it was one of the last conversations I actually had with him because I moved on. But he called me a sound individual, and I was just like, oh, thanks, and I just kept it pushing. It really didn't hit me until just recently, honestly, how big of a compliment that is. And yeah, I just didn't think about it like that way, because it doesn't sound like much up front. But that to call someone that, I think, is a great compliment. So a sound mind is a moderate thinking mind. It is a controlled mind, a mind that isn't controlled by emotion. In fact, a sound mind is controlled by the Spirit. A sound mind actually drives our emotions. It is a discerning mind that is rational in its perception, its comprehension, its judgment, and its decision making. But here's the tough part. The tough part is none of us are born with a sound mind. A sound mind is something that we have to actually work to develop. All right, there's that word work again. We have to work to develop a sound mind. And it's unfortunate because, again, when we're looking at modern times, it seems like in modern times, people are less concerned with working to achieve a sound mind than they are with simply feeling good and feeling good about themselves and making it all about them. Why do you want a sound mind? Well, first and foremost, it keeps your emotions in check, right? So your mind, a sound mind, is basically the ultimate training tool for your emotions. And I've said this before, right? Your mind is your heart's personal trainer. And listen, your heart doesn't always want to listen to your mind. Your heart doesn't always want to do what your mind is telling it to do, right? You feel the way you feel, but then you can't necessarily just respond and react and act on strictly how you feel. You need some rational thought in there. And that's kind of like it's comparable to the personal trainer client relationship, right? You go to a personal trainer because they're going to help you get to a point where you might not be able to get on your own, and they're going to kind of force you to do or motivate you to do things that you wouldn't do otherwise, right? But that are ultimately in your favor, that benefit you, right? Now, if you ask a couple other people, maybe some of my clients, they'd be like, my personal trainer gets on my nerves. I'm pretty sure your mind gets on your heart's nerves. so whatever, right? But that's the idea. That's what, first, it keeps your emotions in check. A sound mind also encourages us to think critically, right? And that kind of seems to be in short supply nowadays, right? But it encourages us to think critically, and it forces us to find, create, and develop more mature ways of thinking. This also is what leads to wisdom. Now, from a Christian perspective, wisdom is supposed to be sought out, right? You have the whole book. Oh, actually, you have a lot of books, but like the whole book of Proverbs talks about wisdom, but it opens up with heralding basically the benefits of wisdom and why we should seek wisdom, right? Seek wisdom, and kind of go from there. So we have to kind of discuss what is wisdom exactly, right? So wisdom is, and I'm going to word this differently in a number of different ways, rather. So knowledge of what is true and right, coupled with just judgment, right? So, that there's multiple kinds of wisdom here, right? There's human wisdom, and the first thing I think about when it comes to human wisdom is the wisdom of the streets. The streets definitely have some form of wisdom. It's kind of hard to explain, but there's definitely a wisdom of the hood, right? But that lines up with human wisdom. Again, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. But even outside of that, so there's human wisdom, there's demonic wisdom. So there's understanding that's as demonic in nature, that I don't mess with at all, but it exists, right? At least if you're reading the Bible, it says that it exists, right? So then there's also the one that we should seek out the most, godly wisdom, right? And to explain godly wisdom, I'm just going to read a verse here, right? I'm going to the book of James, chapter 3, I'll start with verse 16. So James 3:16. Is that right? Yeah, James 3:16. I was almost getting that twisted up with John 3:16. But anyway, James 3:16 says, "For where envying and strife is, there is confusion in every evil work. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy." And I'll just read one verse later here. In verse 18 says, "And the fruit of the righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace." So basically, godly wisdom is handed out. So how is it handed out, though? So it's not like human wisdom or even demonic wisdom, right? It's not just free flowing, right? Proverbs tells you that we ought to seek wisdom. So what kind of wisdom was Solomon talking about there? He was talking about godly wisdom. So you only get godly wisdom by seeking God. But I'm not going to turn this into a giant Bible study or anything like that. But that's a crucial point when trying to understand wisdom and its uses and its application, right? So another definition is the ability to think and act using knowledge experience, understanding, and insight. And I guess what that does is it combines multiple different, so it combines cognitive elements, it combines reflective elements, right? So you're using your thinking, but you're using your observation as well to be able to see what's going on, and is also using some social elements, right? So you know, especially when it pertains to like this is where your compassion and your empathy comes from, right? So it combines all of those elements. That's what wisdom does, right? And you're making it an action, or you're fine tuning your thinking in that way to line up with those elements, utilizing those elements. But keep in mind, when gaining wisdom, when aiming at wisdom or looking to develop wisdom, however you want to say it, it's almost entirely a outward thinking process. So that's why people who spend most of their times in their own thoughts and don't really and like I almost call them like their thought bubbles, right? They spend almost all of their time within their own thought bubbles, and they never really look outside of that. And so they don't really understand anything outside of their own perspective. And that, I mean, that's the majority of modern times now anyway. And I seem like I have a bone to pick with modern times, but I kind of do, right? So, but it's just like that's the result of not really looking outside of your own perspective, right? And you don't really gain wisdom without it. Another reason why you would want to achieve a sound mind, why you will want to possess a sound mind, is because a sound mind leads to better outcomes for generations after you. Now, give me a moment to kind of break that down a little bit first, right? So the process goes like this, right? It starts off with your perception or your comprehension, right? That's where you perceive or comprehend something. That's where your wisdom resides as well, right? And the next thing you do, you make a judgment. And so, and let's, kind of clear this up a little bit. I don't mean like judgment as in like you're judging me because I'm this or you're judging me because of that. Like, no, has nothing to do with that. Judgment in this case means evaluation. So you're evaluating what you perceived and what you comprehended, right? Then from that point comes a decision to be made. You're making a decision. That's where the action comes from. So when all of those things are in line and all of those things are sound and all of those things end up producing good outcomes, they don't necessarily just produce good outcomes for you. They produce good outcomes for people after you. Because this is how societies end up building or collapsing. Terrible decision making or wonderful decision making. But either or, that decision making is lined up based on that process. They perceive, they comprehend, they make a judgment or an evaluation, and then they make a decision, right? So having a sound mind for you within your home, wherever you are, actually affects everyone around you, and it will affect people after you. And I know I don't want to make that seem like it's such like a dramatically big deal, but it is a big deal because things don't change on a grand scale without things changing on a micro scale first. And because we have this setup in this way where you perceive, comprehend, you make a judgment, then you make a decision, a sound mind cannot be manipulated. I repeat, a sound mind cannot be manipulated. And finally, on a more personal level or a more individual level, having a sound mind leads to better mental fitness, which leads to better emotional fitness, which also leads to better physical fitness. So that's why it fits perfectly in with the S.C.A.L. That's why it's one of the pillars of the S.C.A.L. method, because it's absolutely important for you to have a sound mind in order to achieve all of your health and wellness goals. So now the question is, how do you train it? Or how do you train to get to it? So to achieve a sound mind, the first 3 or 4 things that I'm going to mention here, I've mentioned in other episodes already. One of them being meditation. right? That's how you train to get a sound mind, right? If you go back to how to, I think it was with episode 3 of Sound Heart when I said meditation was for suckers, but then I got good at it, right? I detail the different forms of meditation that I do. So the thing is, meditation is crucial in this instance for a sound mind. You actually have to sit back and think. You actually have to be still. And that's kind of like, 1A, and then be still is 1B, right? There's value in stillness. There's value in just sitting back and observing. There's value in not saying anything and watching, okay? That meditation is key. Go back to that episode, listen to that segment, watch that video, whatever you need to do, right? But meditation is one. The next is prayer, of course, right? Prayer, absolutely, right? But if you're not the religious sort, that's perfectly fine. You can skip over that part. But there is a lot of value in prayer. There's a lot of value in connecting to a loving God. But I won't dig too, again, I'm not trying to turn this into a Bible study, but I'll leave that there for you, okay? Another is to use tactics like reframing, right? I also speak of that in A Sound Heart, right? So go back and listen to that episode again. I'm probably going to have to put links in all this stuff. And then another, and a major one, is to, without mercy, ruthlessly eliminate negativity. And while you're at it, take a hatchet to sin. Okay? So you achieve a sound mind by getting rid of the things that cause chaos in your mind. For a lot of people, their own negative thoughts cause them stress. So what I propose to you here is to achieve a sound mind, you eliminate the negativity. And again, while you're at it, eliminate the sin. Because a lot of times that sin will lead to the negativity anyway. So last but not least, you achieve a sound mind, and I hinted at it earlier, you achieve a sound mind by beefing up your critical thinking skills. And now, again, that's going to be the whole random topic. But the ability to critically think is vital to achieving a sound mind. And that's it. That is a sound mind for you, right? Now, you can kind of consider the random topic that I'm about to go into, talking about critical thinking, an offshoot of this sound mind main topic, okay? But, take that information, run with it. Start building up these practices in your life, right? Start eliminating that negativity. Start understanding and setting up practices so that you can perceive and comprehend better, so that you can make better judgment or evaluations. And then therefore, at that point, so that you can make better decisions. Because not only does your vitality, not only does your well-being depend on it, but the well-being of others around you depend on it. And the generations after you absolutely depend on you having a sound mind. All right, let's go. Let's get to this critical thinking random topic that's not so random. Now, first off, what is critical thinking? For a basic definition, critical thinking is the collection and analysis of information in order to make a decision, right? Now, if you wanted a more complex type definition, I'm going to go to this. I think he was a philosopher. He was also a professor in the field of evaluation. His name is Michael Scriven. And his definition is way more complex. I had to write it down. And basically, he says that critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. Now, say that 5 times fast. That's a lot. that's a mouthful, right? But it also, the thing is, it also sounds like a lot of work, and it is. It's intellectual work, right? So remember, last episode I talked about, and it just comes up in, it's on the forefront of my brain, that masculine men work. And I think my hope is that that's not misinterpreted as masculine men go out and get a job and earn a living. That's part of it, sure. But another part of it is they do the intellectual work. They do the thinking work, and they do the emotional work. Masculine men work. And in this instance, to beef up your critical thinking skills, you have to work. That's actually the type of work I'm talking about too, right? It all goes hand in hand. There is work to be done in all 4 arenas of the S.C.A.L method. Remember, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, right? Masculine men work in all 4 of those areas. But before I start going in on a man show again, let me pull out. So the question, really what we want to ask is, how do you develop critical thinking skills? How do you develop your critical thinking skill in and of itself? So you develop other skills to develop that one main skill, right? And that's usually how it works anyway. So you remember the basis or the base of critical thinking is collecting, then analyzing. Okay. So, and there's a number of different things that kind of branch out from under those 2 subsets of critical thinking. But the idea is to accrue skills, level up skills that make you better at collecting and analyzing. Okay? So let's start with collecting. To get better at collecting information, data, ideas, so on and so forth, you first and foremost have to get better at active listening. Okay? That's something that's in short supply right now, right? Because everywhere you go, let's just take, people debating about one thing or the other. It seems like in order for one person to win a debate, they just have to have either a gotcha moment, or B, they just need to overtalk the person and hit them up with so many so-called facts that they can't even really speak. And that's, both are terrible, and both don't actually help anyone with their critical thinking, right? So a point in collecting this information is you have to actively listen. You probably should be listening more than talking, right? Hear different things, perceive different things, comprehend different things. But the only way you can do that is if you're actually listening to what's being said in general, in conversation, what's really being said, right? So the next one is you want to get really good at researching, right? This is another way of collecting data, right? And collecting information, usually by the way, what you can see, right? So get really good at researching different topics and different viewpoints as well that are opposite of what the problem that you're trying to solve, right? Like all of the information in collecting, in the collecting phase of critical thinking, you want to gather all of the information from every single angle. And the next one then you want to do is you want to be really good at observing. So remember earlier on I said there's value in stillness. There's value in being still and just observing, right? This allows you to focus better. But not only just focus better, but this is where you notice the small details, the small shift in someone's voice, the small tick that they have in their shoulder. The value of observation is pretty high when it comes to critical thinking, because that way, that's also data that you can get and gather and collect to make a decision, or to make or to substantiate a belief or an idea, right? So those three, right? So you want to start off, get better at collecting by active listening, by researching better, and by observing more. Okay. So now we want to switch to the analysis part, right? And this is where a lot of people get tripped up. A lot of people can look up a lot of different things because we have information at our fingertips. We have many computers wherever we go in these phones, right? We have access to a whole bunch of data on these things, right? So the actual collecting part is usually not that hard to do. It's the analysis portion that trips people up wherever they go, right? So to get better at analyzing, you have to develop these skills, right? The first one is self-awareness. Why is that one important? Developing self-awareness allows you to identify your own biases, right? So let's just say you're trying to substantiate a particular belief. It's very hard to substantiate a belief and actually keep it to be solid if you don't understand the alternatives. So meaning you have to listen to different viewpoints, even people that you don't even like those. You have to do those types of things, right? But you also have to be kind of ruthless in eliminating your own biases. So, and you have to recognize it first, right? So self-awareness allows you to recognize where you might have potential hangups, where you might have your own thoughts and your own opinions get in the way of the actual truth. Okay. The next one that you want to develop is the skill, and it's kind of like an investigative skill, but you have to be inquisitive, right? You have to get used to questioning everything, all of it, right? Because and I guess a part of that is also asking the right questions at the right time, right? So there are people out there who don't ask any questions about anything. And again, this is to beef up your critical thinking skills, and you're doing this so that you can achieve a sound mind. One of the main ways that a mind that is not sound, one of the main ways that they're manipulated is because they don't ask questions. They don't question, they just take what they're told and they take it at face value without ever examining it, without ever asking any questions about it. And they just proceed on as if that is truth. So in this case, you have to develop the skills of questioning. You have to be inquisitive to get better at the analyzing part, to get better at critical thinking so that you can achieve a sound mind, right? So then we go into the last portion here, where it's like that third skill that you want to have to get better at analyzing the information that you get, the data that you get. You have to be good at evaluating or judging. So here you have to get good at evaluating the reliability of information that you get, right? So you have to almost spot check your sources, right? Because remember, the whole point of the collecting phase is just to collect as much information as you possibly can on a particular topic or particular belief, or to solve a particular problem. You're collecting all the information. You're not passing any judgment on that information yet. You're not saying whether it's good or bad yet. You're just collecting all of it, right? And in order to collect all of it, you can't be in the way of collecting all that information, right? You can't be in the way of finding out if this is actually true or not, right? And that's where you will get the self-awareness to eliminate your biases, right? So the evaluation part, though, is where you actually do the judgment, which is where you actually figure out, is that information good? Did that come from a reliable source? Do they have any other ulterior motive in saying this? That's that. If you could listen, if you can beef up that skill, just purely your skill of evaluation, you will go a far way. You will go a very, very far way. Okay. So, but there's a little kicker at the end of the evaluation process, because that's where you also have to draw conclusions. This is where people get hung up as well, right? They might have everything else knocked out, but then they start to draw these illogical conclusions that say nothing of what the data was actually telling them. And I know I'm getting into the weeds with this one here. And you know what? And this might end up being a separate episode at some point in time, because I really want to dig into this a little bit more, because I think there's a lot of information that could help you out. But again, this is all in efforts to achieve a sound mind. Okay, so the great part about all of this is that you can develop these skills and build up a process that becomes easier to do over time, right? It's like once you critically think about a particular subject or a particular process or a particular thing, and you have that, your structure set up, all it is rinse, wash, repeat, right? And it becomes easier to do. It becomes easier to eliminate your biases, right? To a point where you don't even really start to form them anymore, right? And the great part too is also, as you draw conclusions, you can take that through the process again to see if you arrive at the same conclusions or something different. And that's a whole, again, I'm in the weeds with this one, but those are some tips that you can take, that you can use to develop your critical thinking skills. Okay, let me wrap them off again. Right, we got active listening, researching, observing. Those three help you build your skills in collecting information. Again, and collecting information is simply like either you're looking at it through data, through your eyes, you're listening to it, you're hearing it in podcasts, you're listening to the S.C.A.L method, or you're talking to people. You're talking to professors, you're talking to your neighbors, you're talking to people, right? Side note, that's another reason why we're lacking in the critical thinking skills, because no one talks to anybody anymore. And social media doesn't count, right? Because social media doesn't count because people actually don't say what they really mean on social media. It's like they say what they think they want to mean. so beef up those skills to get better at collecting information. Now you also got to get better at analyzing information. So you have to have self-awareness. You have to be inquisitive, and you have to have good judgment, better evaluation skills, right? And all of those allow you to disseminate the information, break down the data that you collected, throw out the stuff that's false, throw out the stuff that doesn't lead you to a proper conclusion on whatever it is that you're trying to, conclude or decide on, and then draw rational, logical, truthful conclusions on the data that you collected. That's critical thinking. Now, how many of us actually do that on a regular, everyday basis? But you could take that. You could be one of those people who do it all the time. You could be one of those people who has a sound mind, who is not easily manipulated by whatever anybody puts out there. And there's a lot of stuff that's put out there to manipulate you in the way you think, because that ultimately becomes what you do. Here's the skill set. There's the stuff that you need to at least start, and then it'll allow you to explore a little bit more. Go out there, get that information, and don't be afraid to talk to people about it. Don't be afraid to put the ideas out there, right? I think that's one of the number one things that takes us out too. Not the number one. Another thing that takes us out is the fear of being wrong. I don't have that fear because I'm wrong all the time. But then at some point I hit truth, right? And the way I look at it is I'm always seeking the truth. That doesn't necessarily mean I always get there. And the truth sometimes is very elusive because there's so much noise surrounding it. But I'm not going to go any more into it. I'm not going to dig too much more. Listen, beef up your critical thinking skills. Let's end this critical thinking crisis that's going on right now. Let's go out there. Let's start to build up these minds, right? Again, not only you depend on it, but the people around you depend on you having a sound mind. And the generations after you. All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Part 2 of the S.C.A.L method, a sound mind. Okay. Now, listen, I don't want to take too much more of your time. I know I tried to shorten up the episode a little bit here, right? And I'm consistently trying to put out good information. Listen, we have all this stuff out on a YouTube channel. I want y'all to go there. Go to the YouTube channel, check out the videos, make some comments if you want to, right? But share. I need you to share all of the videos. I need you to share all of the episodes of the podcast. Share the page, whatever it is. I need you to share this with people. If you think there's someone out there that could use this information that I'm putting out there, throw it their way. And it is what it is. Just throw it their way, right? Now, we're going to keep it moving, though, right? If you have any questions or anything like that, let me know. But we're going to close this one out. Listen, I'm Coach Evan. This is Say Cheese and Lift Studio. And you just got finished listening to the S.C.A.L Method Podcast, your one-stop shop to not only physical fitness, but mental fitness, emotional fitness, and spiritual fitness. Beef up your critical thinking.